I'd like to ask Marshall Lichtenstein to lead us in the pledge. If we'd all stand, face the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to the Monday, June 14th meeting of the Mayor and Council of the City of Roswell. Do we have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Motion.
Motion by Councilmember Becky Wynn. Is there a second? Does anyone in the council or the audience have any questions regarding the consent agenda? All in favor of the motion raise their hands. Absent tonight with an excuse are Councilman Orleans and Councilmember Eichelhart. First item on the agenda is the public hearing. Councilman Eichelhart is now coming. First thing on the public hearing agenda is the proposed budget. A public hearing on the proposed budget and the millage rate. The millage rate will remain constant. There is no proposal to raise the millage rate at this time. And Mr. Davidson, what would that millage rate be? It was last year, and what would the millage rate be this year?
I think Ms. Love can answer.
Ms. Love's going to have to answer that one.
5.455 mils last year and the same millage rate this year.
And so there'll be no raise in the millage rate. But if you have come here tonight and if you have any questions or comments regarding the budget, this is your opportunity to be heard. Seeing no hands up, is any further discussion by council of either the millage rate or the proposed budget? Then that concludes the mayor's report on the proposed budget and millage rate and the public hearing on that matter. At this time, I'll call upon our liaison to Community Development Department, Councilmember Betty Price. That was quick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The first item, RZ10-04 text amendment regarding companion animals, is being deferred. Does it need an action of this body?
Yes, it does. We need a motion.
Then I move to defer this to the July 12, 2010 Mayor and Council meeting.
Motion by Councilmember Price for deferral. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Diamond. Is there anyone in the audience who came to hear this ordinance, this as regarding pets? Anybody here to be heard on that subject? Any further discussion by council? All in favor of the motion raise their hands. Passes unanimously.
The next item, RZ10-06, which is a text amendment to the zoning ordinance allowing indoor recreation facilities as a permitted use in the Parkway Village District. This is the first reading, and the details will be presented by Brad Townsend.
Mr. Davidson, if you read the first reading of the text amendment.
Thank you. This is an ordinance to amend the Parkway Village permitted uses in Article 12 of the zoning ordinance of the City of Roswell. Now therefore be it ordained and is hereby ordained by the Mayor and City Council of the City of Roswell, Georgia, pursuant to their authority as follows. Article 12, Overlay Districts, Chapter 12.2, Parkway Village Overlay District, Section 12.2.8, Permitted Uses, is hereby amended to add commercial recreation facility indoor with limitations as follows. Text of which is incorporated herein by reference, and if approved, this will be the first reading.
Townsend, if you would go into the details for us, please.
Thank you. This is a proposed text amendment that would add the use of a commercial recreational facility indoor, excluding billiard rooms, pool halls, amusement halls, and video arcades as a permitted use in the Parkway Village overlay. This proposed text amendment was initiated by Mayor and Council, was then reviewed by the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission recommended denial of the proposed text amendment. They felt the definition being included as a permitted use was too broad, that it would allow it to go in any area of the Parkway Village overlay. This is a text, this is the language that's included as the proposed text amendment. You can see we're excluding billiard rooms.
Has this been added to this proposal since the Planning Commission heard this? Is this?
This is the language that was reviewed by the Planning Commission and initiated by Mayor and Council.
So they're saying this is too broad.
Yes.
Did they have a recommendation as to how to narrow it? Or they're saying we shouldn't have recreation anywhere in the district of any sort? Did they have any suggestions on how to narrow it? I understand they thought it was too broad.
They did not, sir.
Thank you. Was any suggestion of what they thought should not be included?
I think there were just discussion when this was brought up that this was for a specific building located next to the CVS. They felt it might be appropriate just for that one location, but they didn't feel it would be appropriate to go into any vacant spaces within the Parkway Village overlay.
So let me see if I've got this straight. You could put a Home Depot anywhere, but you couldn't put a recreational facility anywhere?
The way the current permitted uses are, yes, sir.
And I'm trying to understand the logic. Any insight?
I believe we can get into the discussion about that. I don't know of any.
I'm trying to understand what was the thought of the Planning Commission.
That the use of a commercial recreational facility indoor with its numerous other amusement uses they felt was too broad to open up within the Parkway Village overlay.
All right. But we don't have any direction of what would be narrow.
No.
Thank you.
Okay.
Other questions, Mr. Townsend? I'm sorry to interrupt you.
That's fine.
Anything else you want to add to that?
I'm done, sir.
All right, this time, does the council have any questions for Mr. Townsend? This time we'll hear from the public. Mrs. Price.
I know that there's not an applicant specifically for this project, but do we have any pictures of the current site?
Yes.
And sorry to spring that on you, but it might be helpful.
This is the CVS location located here. This is the existing, I believe it was a nursery building at one time. This is the property. It kind of extends to this area. It's approximately 2 acres in size.
I've heard that building described as a barn. Is that appropriate?
It would be a pole barn,
A what?
more specifically, a pole barn.
That would be probably accurately describe it as a pole barn, correct?
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Councilmember DiPolito.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Townsend, for the uses that we have listed under commercial recreational facilities, do we have a parking requirement information for each of those? I know there was some discussion from, I believe it may have been from the public, about concerns about traffic generation. I know that movie theaters and fitness centers are huge traffic generators. So do we have any parking information, maybe traffic information to look at?
We have specific parking requirements for assembly halls, billiard halls and amusement arcades, ice and roller skating rinks, miniature golf courses, theaters and cinemas, as well as amusement parks.
And what is that? What are those parking requirements?
For a theater or cinema, it's the fixed seats that are allowed. For amusement parks, they are required to provide a study that determines the specific uses. Bowling alleys are per lane. Billiard halls is a square footage, 1 per 200 square feet minimum requirement. The stadium and sports arenas are determined by the bench seating requirement.
So it's really use specific.
It's really-
There's really no
really
benchmark to determine that on.
Right.
And I guess it'd be safe to assume we don't have any ITE study for traffic generation for any of these uses.
Not to my knowledge.
Okay, but we could get it if,
That would probably what we would ask for to determine if there were sufficient or insufficient.
okay, but we could, if we took the time, we could go back and take a look, get some ITE generation for typical uses for these to determine
Yeah.
if they're pretty heavy traffic generators.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Diamond.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Townsend, for instance, at the Lita Thompson Park, if we determined we wanted to put an indoor skate park there, would that be prohibited under this use? I mean, as it stands now?
I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I'm trying to believe this Thompson is Parkway Village, but it's government-owned for us to determine the use.
Technically, the city is exempt from their zoning ordinance.
Other questions? This time we'll hear from one more question. Councilmember Price.
Now, I know when this came to committee, we kind of had an idea of what was the proposed use on that site, and as such, we took defined the definition of, we already had a definition of commercial recreational facility indoor, which is pretty broad, and then we limited it
Yes.
by definition or made exclusions.
Correct.
At that time. If there's objection to this being too broad, is there a way we can narrow it even more for this specific location, or are we able to do it with this text amendment? Would it require another vehicle?
It would probably have to take another vehicle. I mean, to specifically do the use for a site, you'd probably have to have application by that property owner for that to happen on that piece of property. And, the use would have to be probably, I don't know if it could be conditionally allowed or not even, that doesn't work with the overlay district.
It would be possible, however, though, to limit the definition of recreational use, to limit other uses, to limit the type of uses within the Parkway Village within a indoor recreational facility. We've already talked about billiard parlors
Right.
and video arcades.
Right.
If the council wished to, they could limit it to specific recreational uses, and they could be as specific as they wanted to. But that use would have to be, under the present thing, it would have to be allowed as a use in the district. But it can limit that use to you could say for indoor frisbee throwing only,
Yes.
or you could say for frisbee throwing and baseball. So the council can limit the use if that's the choice of council.
Correct.
Other questions? Before I hear from the public. At this time, we'll hear from anyone in the audience. If you'd like to speak, you'll need to come forward, give us your name and address, and before you leave, give us a speaker card. Yes, sir, come forward.
My name is Shane O'Fallon. I live at 205 Sussex Court, right behind the building that you're talking about. First question I have is, what's the incentive to go to all this trouble for this building? Why is the council wanting to go to all this trouble to rewrite your definitions for this building? What's the gain? It's right behind an old established neighborhood. It's one street from the neighborhood you live in, Mr. Wood, and there's no parking there. It was an old warehouse building. It's not a pole barn, it's a warehouse building, but it backs up to an old established neighborhood. So it really is not lending itself to any of these uses that you're describing. We also have sports and recreational facilities down on Alpharetta Highway that are struggling so there's not the demand. So the question is, what's the gain for the council to go to all this trouble to figure out why this thing's going to work?
There's no monetary gain for this council. No council member, no elected official will have any monetary gain by passing this or not passing it, either way.
Well, all it's going to do is devalue the neighborhood behind it. And the need, have we established the need for that facility as a sports or a skating rink or some other type of facility that's indoor? Is there a need for that? We got a park across the street that's 36 acres or?
In making zoning changes, the question is not, is there a need? When someone applies to put a facility in, there is no needs requirement. The question is, it is a suitable use along a 6-lane highway within the Parkway Village. That's the question. And if it may or may not be a suitable use is depending upon this council's decision. But need is not part of the assessment. When in the Parkway Village someone does not have to justify a need to construct, they simply have to say, do we meet the requirements of the ordinance? And we're trying to see, is this a compatible or an incompatible use? And a use in a Parkway Village, Mr. Townsend, would you just go over for the audience the potential uses for this property within the Parkway Village district?
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
could we also describe the underlying district, of the zoning of that as well?
I think it's residential.
I think the underlying zoning is E1, which is residential. The list of uses the permitted uses in the village, Parkway Village, corporate headquarters, corporate campus development, churches and their customary related uses, including cemeteries, horticulture and agriculture, parks, playgrounds, community centers and schools, public buildings such as libraries, museums, and art galleries, single-family residential, condominiums and townhomes, banks and other financial institutions, business and professional offices, including but not limited to medical, dental, legal, financial, architectural, engineering, real estate, insurance, and manufacturing representatives. Personal service establishments, including but not limited to barbers and beauty shops and shoe repair. Service stations providing that all buildings and appurtenances are located at least 400 feet from any residential district line. And all
That wouldn't be a permitted use on this site because it wouldn't have the room.
Right. Retail establishments except no automobile dealers, no motels, no liquor stores, no drive-in theaters. Restaurants, grills, or similar eating, drinking establishments, including drive-ins. Nursery schools, kindergartens, daycares, continuing care, retirement communities, institutional residential living care facilities, and adult care facilities. That's the list of permitted uses under the Parkway Village.
So those are allowed uses within the district. And the question for this council is a recreational use, limited or unlimited, compatible with these other uses, and is a bigger burden upon the neighborhood. So the council, in passing this, is not making a specific decision about a specific piece of property as much as saying, of all of these uses, is this an appropriate use within this corridor?
Well, if I may speak my opinion, I think that the building basically is trying to be rezoned so that it can be sold because the guy can't sell it, and he's been trying to sell it for over 5 years, and it's a big warehouse, and it's going to devalue multiple homes in the neighborhood behind it if it's changed. And I don't see the use that you're describing would be of any value to the area whatsoever. So that's just my opinion.
Thank you, sir. Who else would like to speak? Yes, sir. Come forward.
My name is Bill Powell. I'm a resident of Waverly Hall subdivision. I'd like to speak against this proposal to amend the Parkway Village permitted uses. First, as a point of clarification, the Planning and Zoning Commission rejected this motion as it was currently written. I don't even know why it's here tonight. It clearly said in the minutes from that meeting that they needed to clarify the language and make certain that these definitions that we're debating now were clarified. And I can't tell that that's been done in any way, shape, or form. So I think we've got some, potentially some very bad possibilities of use that could come out of this simply because we don't have good definitions right now. The other reasons I would speak against this, Mr. Mayor and Council, is that the Parkway Village overlay is working. It's done its job. I don't know why we need to amend it. We have places where large recreational facilities can go, and we already have a zoning classification where those types of businesses can locate. If you want to get specific about that piece of property that we were just looking at a minute ago, there's a vast difference between that piece of property and, say, the shopping center where Linens and Things and other vacant properties are. There's the development is completely different. The egress and going in and out is totally different. There's very little room there for any sort of parking, much less an actual large indoor facility. So if we were getting into specifics about the parcel itself, I'd have to question whether that would ever be a good use for that piece of property. As I said before, the language is vague and broad. I think we need to work on that definition. I wouldn't necessarily be against the highest and best use principles for the properties that are currently vacant, etc. But I would hasten to say that I think a lot of the reason why those properties are vacant now is because we didn't do the due diligence in the initial zoning that would keep those properties viable and useful now. So I think it's totally inappropriate for this area. It's right in the middle of an E3 underlying zoning. It would seriously devalue the properties that are already have been devalued even further. And so I'd be totally against this, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
What do you believe would be appropriate on that site, given the uses? Do you feel all the uses that were discussed were appropriate on that site, but not recreational?
I think that many of those that were listed just a minute ago as Parkway Village application or uses would be appropriate there.
So
we've got
retail
already
would be
we've got
appropriate?
examples of it anyway. You know, we've got chiropractors, dentist office, drugstore, et cetera, all along there. So, yeah, those would be fine. But a large recreational facility that would be handling lots of traffic coming in and going out at a location such as that, it would not be appropriate.
I'm just trying to understand how the devaluation occurs if it's, say, used for a retail or a restaurant versus used for a
Well, it's already being
recreational
used for a
facility.
commercial purpose now. So, I mean, I understand that you have to have some possibilities. In other words, we can't just make it residential again, I don't think. So there are certain types of uses that would be appropriate, but a large recreational facility, no.
And I'm just trying to understand what makes a large recreational facility not acceptable, whereas a restaurant would be. I'm trying to understand this.
Well, the traffic is the number one reason. I mean, I don't know. For example, We talked about doing some studies earlier. I think that's a very good idea. We have some data that we could probably apply to that property. But I'm envisioning if you have a recreational facility where you have children coming in and going out with parents, etc., there'd be large volumes of traffic in big waves, as opposed to, say, a restaurant where it'd be much less obtrusive.
So one of your concerns is traffic. And I'm trying to, are there other concerns other than the traffic that would be generated?
The location itself, there's parking issues, I would think, because again, it's not at it's set back from an intersection considerably. So getting in and out, not only from a traffic standpoint, but just for parking in general, seems to me would be an issue.
And how would that differ, say, from a restaurant or from a retail area, the parking?
Because, well, I don't know. I don't know how big the restaurant would be, but an indoor soccer facility is going to be much larger than most of the restaurants in Roswell by a considerable amount. So that would say to me that, first of all, you're going to have more people coming in and out, and second of all, you're going to have more needs for parking and other amenities to handle that large of a space that you would not have, say, for a restaurant.
So if the council put a parking, you did a study, said a facility of this type needs this much parking, and that was met, I understand you still have the traffic objection.
Right.
But parking is something that can be addressed through regulation. Would you still object if there were adequate parking? Other than
I can't answer that question right now until we see what is
so
proposed.
You saw what the parking.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Good point. Your concern is that it would generate traffic, and there's not adequate parking provided for under the ordinance.
Correct.
Good point. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. DiPolito.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That conversation brought up a couple of additional questions I have for staff. Under the proposed, well, not quite proposed application, any changes to the building or the site would require a rezoning or a Parkway Village use, is that correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
Unless they use the building as is, it would be an adaptive reuse, and that could be done administratively?
If there's certain criteria under adaptive reuse, yes. But I believe they can't change the exterior of the building.
How large is the building now, do you know?
Over 20,000 square feet is our understanding.
The nature of the building, Rich, it's not the free span inside. There are poles inside the building supporting the roof. So the current building would not be suitable for a soccer facility because of the existence of the poles that holding up the roof inside. There's no large free span area.
So they would be required to come in for small tract status?
Yes.
And does this qualify for small tract status?
That's a determination that the council would have to make at that time.
Okay. Well, we have an existing CVS on one side. What's the use on the other side?
I believe that's the roofing. I think that's a roofing company.
Mr. Roof? Okay, thank you.
Who would like to speak next? Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. Come forward. Good evening.
My name is Jan Waring, and I live at 245 Sussex Court, and you were looking at my driveway there. If you'll indulge me just for a moment, I've lived in my home for 30 years, and when we bought our property, Woodstock Road was a 2-lane highway, and there were homes all along the road. And that was a nice draw for us to settle in that neighborhood. So with normal growth and things, we're We saw where the road widened, and we saw where other properties and different businesses came, where the roofing and the insurance and people back up to my property now. That's fine. It doesn't change to me the feeling of where I am and my home and my street, but I have really grave concerns about putting something in that would attract a very specific population. And I think in addition to any kind of parking or other issues of that nature, I think when you look at something that is very specific to one group, I think you're open to possible problems. My children grew up with the roller skating rink down in Roswell, and I was fine for them to go there on a Saturday afternoon and have a good time, but they did not go any other time. And the reason they didn't go was that there was a lot of other activities that were around on the outside of that building and things that were not okay for my children to be around. So I have huge fears for this to come into my neighborhood. And to be very simple about it, I was there first. I bought my property in good faith that this was going to be a really good neighborhood for me to live in for however long I choose to. And I don't think something like a roller rink or a sporting facility is going to do my house any good or my property any good at all. So I don't understand all the legal things. I'm speaking to you very emotionally, and I hope you take my concerns seriously.
Thank you. Who would like to speak next? Yes, come forward, please.
Hi, I'm Lisa Peverill. I live at 545 Meadow Glen Trail, Meadow Oaks subdivision, one of the small, older subdivisions along the Parkway Village corridor. We've been dealing with Parkway Village since its inception, and those of us who've been here for a long time and have addressed some of these issues along the way, we completely understand and appreciate that there will always be commercial development along Parkway Village. That was the whole point of it, was to preserve the integrity of the residential neighborhoods that were directly behind and adjacent to Parkway Village along its 6-point-whatever-mile corridor, while keeping specifically in mind that it was not Holcomb Bridge Road. I went back and I read some of the old minutes from the 90s when some of the issues of Target and other times where we were getting down to kind of brass tacks on some of the initial development and the big box ideas and all of that, and people were really, there was all the wailing and gnashing of teeth at the time, and it required a lot of people to come to the table with some good reason about why we had Parkway Village, why we had the permitted uses that we had, and why we didn't have the permitted uses that we didn't have. And I think that having a permitted use in Parkway Village that allows pretty much anything except a pool hall and an Elks Lodge, in other words, no pool hall, no Dave & Buster's, no Star Time, but pretty much anything else that can be considered recreation is allowed. I have great concerns about movie theaters, roller rinks, for a lot of the reasons that have already been stated tonight. I know what happens at roller rinks. I know what Star Time became. I don't think, going back, Mr. Mayor, I can read some of the things you said back in the 90s as well as some of the others. That wasn't the goal. That wasn't the point. We were specifically trying to avoid that within Parkway Village. And I think unless we limit this, I don't really have a problem with an indoor soccer facility. I don't think any of us do. We allow parks within the Parkway Village. This isn't that far outside of that idea. While fitness facilities aren't currently allowed within the permitted uses, but they would be under this one, one of the big issues that came up at the Planning and Zoning Committee meeting, which hasn't been mentioned tonight, that was one of the questions that you asked earlier, was how do we have fitness facilities and how do we have taekwondo dojos and other martial arts facilities within Parkway Village if they're not specifically allowed now? How did they get in? Well, they got in under personal services facilities and then snuck in fitness equipment. I'm not sure how the taekwondo thing worked. But, it's always been a give and take, and it always will be a give and take. I have significant questions about the adaptability of this specific parcel for this specific use, because it can't be adaptive reuse, as you brought up, because the building itself doesn't fit its intended purpose. So then it would have to be developed under a small tract, which would be another foray through this body for that process as well, which, if it's too difficult, maybe it's not necessary, maybe it's not a good idea. This facility was originally an agricultural facility. It could easily be a nursery under its present configuration. I don't think anyone would argue with that. It doesn't require a zoning change. It doesn't require all of the hubbub and allowing for movie theaters with unattended teenagers, roller rinks with unattended teenagers, Star Time. Star Time wouldn't come in because it's got a video arcade, but pretty much anything else along that vein would. So I just think we need to step back and look at why we're going to upset the apple cart of the Parkway Village that really works for this that I don't think is needed. We have these facilities on the corridors where they are allowed, and we specifically were not trying to make this corridor be those places. And I think that's all I had to say.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Who would like to speak next?
My name is Todd McIntaggart, and I'm at 215 Sussex Court. I backed up to the picture as well. A lot of these folks here that are here tonight are from our neighborhood. They've lived in that neighborhood for their entire lives. They raised their children there. They've watched it change over the years. They've watched 92 go from a 2-lane road to a 6-lane road and just continue to expand through the corridor. My story is a little bit different. I just moved to the neighborhood 8 years ago, and one of the reasons why we picked that neighborhood and we picked Roswell was because it wasn't overdeveloped, because that Parkway Village District was as neat and clean and modern and limited in its usage as it was zoned to be. Quite honestly, 8 years ago, if someone had told me that that specific property might have been rezoned to the potential uses that you're talking about tonight, I may very well not have picked Roswell as a place to move my family, raise my children, or at least not in that neighborhood, not in that location. I sympathize with the gentleman who owns that property. Obviously, he's had a tough time selling that property the way it is designed today, but I think it would be a disservice of this council to the people who live in our neighborhood to rezone the area to essentially help him sell his property at our expense in our neighborhood. Because that's essentially what it would be doing. You'd be saying, all right, I don't even know who this gentleman is, but if he can't sell that property, it is not our problem, it is not our fault, and the whole district should not be rezoned so that he can move his piece of property, and then our houses can be devalued, and we can lose our investment and our love of the neighborhood the way it's designed today.
Thank you. Who would like to speak next? Yes, sir. Come forward, please.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is Mike Whittle, and I live at 200 Sussex Court and have done for the last 30 years. We brought up our family here. I'm also a business owner in Roswell, and I was horrified at the thought of having a skating rink really adjoining our 200 Sussex Court. It's just something that really doesn't fit in with the neighborhood. Very concerned about parking and the types of people that roller rinks attract. I have grandchildren. I also have had children of my own, and we too went to the Roswell roller rink behind the mall, and they really enjoyed it there. But that was a different location. I just think this is just not practical for this part of the world. That's what I have to say.
A question, please. I've heard a lot of folks object to roller rinks, but I've also heard that it extends beyond roller rinks. What we're trying what I'm seeing if there's a possibility of is a use on this property that would be acceptable to the neighborhood, that would include some recreation. And let me give you an example. We've had some big boxes that we've had some interest in an athletic facility coming in to fill those big boxes. It's not this building, but other locations. and we're looking to how can we fill an empty store? How can we fill a piece of property that's derelict, that's closed?
It's been like that for many years, too.
Which has been like that for many
Yes.
years. Which is, in the long run, it's not healthy to have derelict buildings. And so we were approached by someone who wanted to put a youth soccer club in this facility. And because we've got a recreational facility across the street, one of the larger ones in the city of Roswell.
Which is beautiful, and we love it.
So I'm trying to say is that you told me that you're objecting to a roller rink. It would be easy to exclude a roller rink from this facility. It would be easy to exclude some uses. On the other hand, I expect some other folks are opposed to any recreational use on this facility. Now, I'm just trying to, you talked about roller rinks. Is that are you opposed to any recreational use, or is it specifically a roller rink you're opposed to?
It was my understanding that it was to be a roller rink. I might be wrong with that, but I certainly would consider other facilities. But you must look at the property and realize that the land's not that big there, and if you've got parking problems, it's going to be just impossible to get in and out.
Well,
and you've got a divided highway, and I can remember being with your father and the 98 problem, all those years ago, and we talked about it a great deal, and actually we did lose in the end. Just hope we don't lose this one.
Well, the point is that I'm trying to, the question I'm raising is, we're not deciding what the parking requirements are. We're just deciding tonight, is some recreational use under possible? It would take a second hearing before this council. It would take a parking study, perhaps, if we allow recreational uses.
Well,
what I'm trying to decide is, in the specific proposal that came to us, which has initiated this, was some folks said, we would like to see it would be possible to put a indoor youth soccer facility in. That was the specific proposal. Now, there is no contract. I don't know if that would come in. That's what initiated this. And as a city government, if there is a use that a recreational use that was appropriate on this, I was trying to see, is there some limited recreational use that is appropriate, or is it opposed to any recreational use? And a roller rink was never proposed. It's part of the current ordinance. And my first question, and my question all along has been, is there some way we can limit this ordinance that it would be acceptable to the community, or is this a blanket objection to any recreational use? And what I'm hearing from you, maybe.
Maybe. I like recreation. I like sports of all kinds. And I'd certainly consider it, yes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Wood.
Yes, sir. But wait a minute. I will get back to you once everyone else has had an opportunity to speak. What we like to do is give everybody the opportunity to speak.
I just wanted to respond to your question.
Well, we'll give everybody a chance to speak, and then I'll come back. Anyone else wish to speak? Yes, sir. Come forward.
Mayor and Council, I'm Larry Hand. I live at 1075 Grace Hill Drive. I'm quite a ways away from this location, and the one thing I've not heard tonight that I'd like to add is I haven't heard any discussion about the noise. Soccer facilities, as a perfect example, if there's a goal scored, the announcer screams, the people scream, even though it's inside in a tin building, whether it's a pole barn or whatever, there's a certain amount of noise created that I think the immediate residents in that area would find disturbing. We can hear the football games at the Roswell Stadium. I understood that when I moved in. That's not a problem for me. But I do think that seeing things like auditoriums, meeting halls, ice and roller rinks that would be allowed all the way through the village area there are a real concern to me, because those noises, if this was passed as written, could clearly create noises in my neighborhood that I wouldn't like. Not at that soccer location if it turned into soccer. My observation specifically about that particular facility, you mentioned, Mr. Mayor, big box stores. They have lots of parking around a closed big box store. This place does not, and it was never intended to park 50 cars, which easily could show up for 2 teams playing soccer or a tournament for the weekend at a soccer facility, even an indoor facility. And there just wouldn't be room on that property for that. So my opinion is that property needs to be used for the commercial purposes similar to what's there today, retail, office buildings, and those sort of things that are common and allowed in this corridor today. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, sir,
for hearing me.
Let me get this young lady here.
Jackie O'Fallon from 205 Sussex. We have the pool and everything backing up to that property. I don't understand why, already we already have Target, we already have multifamily that we've never really thought was going to happen. We understood the Target, we understood the growth of the Home Depot, it's done well. Now we have 1 million, what is it called, multiple condos right against the street. I just don't think you or Pug really started that. I don't think that was something that was really meant for Roswell. I've worked downtown for 15 years in downtown Roswell. I am so disappointed that there's even a question for this. Now, you're not talking about a ballet studio. You're not that's a recreational use. You're not talking about what happens is every time we give an inch, you take a mile. All we're trying to do is keep it in a small, residential, quality neighborhood that's been there. And I think everybody in the surrounding area wants the same thing. That's all I want to say.
Thank you. Just come forward.
Jean Rarick, 620 Jones Road. I have a son who participates in soccer, and I've been to many soccer barns. And my one concern about this is the nighttime lighting and the noise. Typically, these facilities are used heavily in the winter when it gets dark early, and they require significant lighting out in the parking lot for the teenagers and children and parents that use it to be able to come in and drop their kids off or park and whatnot. And I think the way this property extends back into the neighborhood, you're going to have significant bleed over of light as well as the noise. They're correct. Every time a goal is scored, the kids scream, and it's just every time I've been in a soccer barn, there's a soccer barn over on Birmingham Highway. The buildings aren't well insulated, and you can hear it outside, and there's just a lot of light. And it's very different from the other uses that we have in Parkway Village, where they tend to be daytime business type uses, and usually by the time it gets dark or the people are trying to go to bed, there's not a lot of noise or a lot of light. So just wanted to bring those points up. Thank you.
Thank you. Who else would like to speak? Yes, sir, come forward.
Good evening. My name is Marshall Lichtenstein. I live at 530 Meadowglen Trail in Roswell. About 2 decades ago, maybe longer, 6 districts were designated by the city to be established to form their own identity to help with the residential integrity of the neighborhoods that surrounded them. Of those 6 districts, there's only 2 that survive today. Just 2. The Historic District and the Parkway Village. There's a reason for that. It works. Why on earth would you want to change something that works? I live out there. I like living out there now. It's a pleasant place. We can go up the street and have dinner or shop. Why would you want to change that? Why would you want to open the door for change further down the road, years down the road? It's not broke. Please don't fix it. Please. Thank you so much.
Who else would like to speak? Thank you, Mr. Lichtenstein. Yes, come forward, please.
Hello, I'm Paula Kimmick, and I live at 230 Sussex Court. And I would just like to reiterate what a few other people have said about the noise. And you had asked what kind of business might be acceptable, and you kept saying a restaurant. And I don't want a Taco Mac at my back door either. So I don't think a restaurant, unless it's going to close at 5 or 6, that would be nice. But that's not realistic. So I don't vote for that either. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Who'd like to speak next? I see no hands up. I had the gentleman who wanted to have one more. Yes, sir. You've already had a chance to speak. Is this something you knew you wished to add?
Yes.
I'm going to give one of you a chance to speak. Because typically we call the folks one time. We'll give you a chance for one of you to give a rebuttal.
I'm answering your question exactly. You seem to ask everybody, what do you think should be in there? One, a restaurant is not the location for a restaurant. That is really not the place for a sporting facility in any means. It really needs to be a chiropractic office, a dental office, some sort of professional, a small attorney's firm, architectural firm. Those are the kind of things that would be perfectly fit in that location, where they have small amounts of traffic, maybe 6, 7 clients at a time. There's no way that facility in that location is going to handle 200, 300 people coming in and out of that facility in any given moment. And all it's going to do is devalue. And so to answer your question, it needs to be something that is highly professional. That the restaurant thing is totally out of question. Really, the whole athletic thing is out of the question. It just doesn't fit in that facility. We have all those shopping centers with vacant spots that would be perfect for all of these types of things. So I know you want to fill a spot, and I'm answering your question, what should be in there? Something, you may have to redo the barn or the warehouse. The warehouse was grandfathered in as agricultural, and then it became commercial because of the location. But it really doesn't fit in those other areas. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll give the other gentleman an opportunity to comment if there's anything you wish to add.
No, other than I agree with Mr. Fallon that there's plenty of other shopping centers with parking already available. Your question was about what the issue with parking was. I think there's plenty of shopping centers in the district already that if it needed to be zoned that way, the parking spaces are already there. It can already handle the traffic. You don't need to create a new location that would have to be redesigned and reconfigured to do what existing locations already do.
Public hearing is closed. This time we'll hear from council. Councilmember Wynn.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Anytime that we start looking at text amendments, the first thing I ask myself is, how is it going to affect everyone or the whole city of Roswell? And I think this is true to this one about the Parkway Village. If we change this and we add this text amendment to do recreational facilities, how is this going to affect the Parkway Village? Not just this piece of property, but all properties in Parkway Village. My concern is this: it's going to open up the doors. That means that if they meet all the standards of Parkway Village, they don't have to come to us. They can put in whatever they want to put in there. I don't like tinkering around with something, Mr. Lichtenstein. I agree with you that is not broken. I also agree with Mr. Hand that anytime we start fooling around with something like that, we have to look at the consequences. I don't think the consequences are good for this. I think the Parkway Village is really a great overlay. I wish I had been part of it when it had been passed. So as this is written, I will not be supporting this text amendment.
Anyone who wish to comment before we entertain a motion? Councilmember Eichelhardt.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of things. One on the why it doesn't even move forward after the Planning Commission denied. That's just our system. That's the way it works. The Planning Commission is just a recommending body, and then whatever's moving forward has to come here for a decision. So even though they said no, that's why it did come forward. And the other reason I think that even began, as it has been said, is that we're trying to help a property owner in the supposed anti-business city that we're trying to do some things for development in some areas. I've probably been the one that's been branded most as being so-called anti-business, but the main reason is because we've often considered what are the impacts around the people who live in that, whatever that place is, for whatever development it is, whether it's residential or commercial. And clearly, this is one of those areas where, you know, the initial effort doesn't make sense for what the actual impact would be. So I would agree with Councilwoman Nguyen, and you know, one option could be that we could keep working on this, but frankly, you know, I think it clearly got out of hand and what got started, so we might as well just let it go at this point and not take any more time.
Does anyone else wish to comment before we entertain a motion? Councilmember Diamond.
Being the new grunt here, I'm not really clear on what happens if somebody comes in and say they want to put a recreational facility in the old linens and things. Is that something that's out of the question if the way we're looking at it?
Without this amendment, it would be out of the question as not allowed. This is a consideration of whether we want to expand any of the uses within the Parkway Village District. There's a specific example before us which initiated it, but we're not deciding on that specific example, and that would require another hearing as far as adaptive use to come forward.
Okay, that's the way I understood it. I guess, you know, I know a lot of soccer families too, and I am excited about the concept, but I do agree that this is a much smaller spot. You know, as I talked to the gentleman who months and months ago who was looking at doing this, I said, are you going to be able to do soccer tournaments? And he said, sure. And I said, well, you know, is that going to be a big enough spot? We'd like to see something that could maybe be an all things to all people kind of facility. And I'm hopeful that while this may not be our answer, that we can maybe find him something in a more appropriate spot, because I think the concept is wonderful and would be a great asset to the city.
Does anyone else wish to comment before we entertain a motion? Councilmember DiPolito.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councilwoman Diamond. I think when you start looking at buildings like the Lindenton things that has been sitting empty and it's currently a shopping center, it's probably an appropriate place for some sort of an indoor recreation facility. The problem that we have is once we start opening the door to the entire district, then we run into situations like this particular site where it looks like we're trying to put a square peg in a round hole. So I think the intention here, as Councilman Eichelhart mentioned, the intention was to try to be business friendly and to try to produce a text amendment that would be helpful to the community. I think we probably have overshot a little bit and need to rethink this one. Thank you.
Any further comments before we entertain a motion? Do we have a motion?
I guess it's up to me. Hearing no one speaking on behalf of the proposal, I recommend or move that we deny this request.
Motion for denial by Councilmember Price. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Nguyen. Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. Price, if you'll call the next item, please.
Thank you. The next item is number 4, approval of an amendment to the erosion and sedimentation control ordinance. This is the first reading of this that will be presented by Alice Wakefield.
This is the adoption of a new ordinance that is mandated by the state and must be adopted by July 1st, 2010 to maintain the city's local issuing authority. This new ordinance is based on the model ordinance provided by the Georgia Soil and Water Conservation, and staff's recommendation is that this first reading be approved with the provision that it comes back at the next mayor and council meeting of June 21st so that we can meet the mandated deadline of July 1st. The city engineer is here to give greater detail and to answer any and all questions that you may have regarding the ordinance.
Mayor
Let's
and
have Mr. Davidson read the ordinance first.
Thank you. This is an ordinance to amend Chapter 7, Land Development and Environmental Protection, Article 7.3, Erosion and Sedimentation of the Code of Ordinances of the City of Roswell. Now therefore, to accomplish the foregoing, the mayor and council pursuant to their authority adopt the following ordinance. The Code of Ordinances of the City of Roswell shall be amended by deleting Article 7.3, Erosion and Sedimentation, from the code in its entirety, and substituting therefore a new Article 7.3, Soil Erosion, Sedimentation, and Pollution Control, attached hereto as Exhibit A and incorporated herein by reference, and have approved that this would be the first reading.
You may proceed, Ms. Hurd.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council members. We're proposing to adopt the model ordinance that was put forth by Georgia Soil and Water Conservation Commission, pretty much as they submitted it, to replace in entirety our current sediment and erosion control ordinance. We kept some portions of our former ordinance, notably the sections of the ordinance dealing with citations, the section of the ordinance dealing with the steep slope ordinance, and the section which includes our soil and erosion control committee and fund. Those were some significant things that we kept. Additionally, we have a 1/10 acre or more requirement for the ordinance to apply to some conditions, and we've changed that 1/10 acre to 5,000 square feet, which is more in alignment with what some of the other communities here in North Fulton use. It's instead of 4,356 will now be 5,000 square feet. I also updated some areas that just referred to code when indeed it was the Georgia code, and I changed that to OCGA in a few places. And then there were some items that used Roman numerals, and they've also been updated now to reflect the new numbering system that we've got here. In terms of the fees, there's two sections where fees are addressed in the ordinance, and those are being changed so that we can come forward with a proclamation to change those fees. One is the $250 per acre for the erosion control fee, and the other is the soil erosion fee of, I believe it's $20. So those two things I'll bring a resolution to you and send out some comparisons. I've finished doing my research to compare us to other communities in terms of what they're charging for the soil and sediment erosion control fees, and they range, they're significantly higher than what we charge currently. So I'll be getting out a memo this week about that.
Does the council have any questions? Do we have a motion?
Dr. Price has a question.
Dr. Price.
Help me in the reading of this that's stapled together. That's the ordinance?
I'm not sure what you have that's stapled together there, but it's Exhibit A is the ordinance.
It's in our packet. It's stapled together. Yes, Exhibit A. So that is what we're voting on. And can you tell me if the red letters mean anything?
The red letters signify the changes that are to the model ordinance. Those are the things that I updated in the model ordinance to reflect those things that I just mentioned that we either retained from our current ordinance or the minor things that I changed, like the Roman numerals to whatever and things like that. So they're basically the edits that I made to the model ordinance are in red just so that you can see them a little more clearly how I changed it.
Okay, so a lot of this is basically required. Is that the idea? I mean, for instance, we've got changes of definition from our current code. For instance, local issuing authority, which used to be just our city, and now it includes the county. There are some Roman numerals scattered here and there.
Right. Well. I don't think they made it into that final Exhibit A. They'll be part of, for next week, for the final reading, they'll be included. They just didn't make it into the document in time for your copy.
Okay, and I noticed that the whole title of the ordinance has changed. That now includes the word pollution.
Yes, ma'am.
Which doesn't even occur in the definitions. I really am curious what pollution is.
It's the pollution control ordinance. Typically, you're saying there's no definition dealing with pollution in here?
No.
We can add a definition if you want. It was not in the model ordinance, but typically when you're talking about NPDES and the construction general permit, the state permit, pollution control deals with things like the materials that are kept on site, fuels and additives, things like that, that you want to keep safe and you want to have secondary containment in case they leak, things like that.
And is it our intention to delete all references to previous amendments?
I would believe so, since we're replacing the ordinance in its entirety.
Okay. It just seems like we had a lot of definitions previously that aren't now included, whether or not we don't mind not having them, or if we feel like we need to. I was a little concerned about that, but...
Well, we're required to change this ordinance when the state laws change, and over the last 10 years, I'd say there's been some significant changes in terms of definitions and the way things are permitted and the permit requirements that we enforce. So I think a lot of those changes in definition, some of the changes in definition that I noted were actually incorrect, how the city had changed them before. For instance, they took the word director and they made it also mean the director of community development, when in fact the term director in the ordinance, the way it's written, refers to the director of EPD. And our director of community development cannot do what the director of EPD is allowed to do per this ordinance. So you have to be very careful when you start making additions or deletions or changes to a model ordinance, that you understand the underlying reasoning for the requirements the way they're written in the model ordinance. And so we've been very careful. As you'll note, the things that we retained in whole, like the steep slope ordinance and the soil erosion fund, because they're kind of like addenda to our ordinance. They're not really kind of like woven through it at all.
I also got the impression that some of the professional qualifications were being reduced. Is that my impression only?
They're not being reduced. The terminology has changed from qualified to certified. So people that inspect and review plans are now certified. And so all that terminology has changed from being qualified personnel and whatever into certified personnel. And the state has a certification program in place for those people to become certified.
As we previously defined professional engineer, and that verbiage is nowhere to be seen.
That's correct, because professional engineers, it's not just professional engineers who are certified plan designers. You can now have landscape architects, surveyors, people who are certified professions in sediment. There's a CPESC, it's Certified Professional in Erosion and Sediment Control. They can also design these plans. So it's no longer just professional engineers that can do it, and therefore the term is a certified design professional, I believe, is what they use.
And the administrative appeal and review is still at the county level, even considering a lot of these things are incorporating federal and state requirements?
There's not really an administrative appeal at a county level. The administrative appeal is here at mayor and at city level with mayor and council.
Is still county, is that right?
It's basically, it goes to the municipal court, but they have an option to request that it be moved to the Superior Court of Fulton County.
So when does the state ever come into it then?
Pardon me?
Does the state ever come into it as far as any appeal, since this is a state mandate?
The state comes into it if we, as the local issuing authority, ask them to come in and provide a consent order. If there's an encroachment or something that the city is not able to handle. But typically the city should be able to handle just about every incident. We have one currently where the state is working on a consent order with Fulton County. that's a buffer encroachment on the Chattahoochee River. That's one instance where EPD is getting involved in writing the consent order, and they will determine the fine.
Okay, well, I look forward as soon as possible the updated, neat version so we can look at that before we expire the time that we're allotted to make this decision.
I'll have it to you tomorrow morning.
Great, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
Move to proceed with the second reading.
Move to approve the first reading.
Move to approve the first reading, proceed with the second reading before July 1.
Motion by Councilmember Price to approve the first reading. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember DiPolito. The motion was by Councilmember Price. Further discussion by, well, first of all, does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Any further discussion by council? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously.
Thank you.
The next item is approval of a resolution to accept the 2010 Historic Preservation Fund grant and approval of budget amendment 7322G5-06-14-10 in the amount of $6,000. Brad Townsend.
Yes, this is for a resolution to accept the Historic Preservation Fund grant. This is a 60-40 match, total grant of $6,000. It is for interpretive signs to the Methodist, Presbyterian, and Founders Cemetery, and a brochure. The brochure and signs similar to this to be located at the cemetery. It is staff's recommendation to approve the resolution to accept the grant funds.
Does the council have any questions for Mr. Townsend? Do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
Motion by Councilmember Price for approval. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Eigelhart. Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Any further discussion? All in favor of the motion, raise your hands. Passes unanimously.
The next item is approval of a resolution to accept fiscal year 2010 Community Development Block Grant, CDBG, for the Sway Branch Drive Infrastructure Project and approval of budget amendment 4224G1-06-14-10 in the amount of $117,627.69. Alice Wakefield.
This is a request to approve the grant award for the funds to be used for the extension of the Sway Branch Drive to connect with Marketplace. This project is located in a CDBG target neighborhood. This grant award was approved by Fulton County on May the 19th. This is just the next step in moving that project forward. Staff's recommendation is for approval.
Does the council have any questions? Does anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? Do we have a motion?
Move to approve.
Motion to approve the CDBG grant for Sway Branch Drive and the budget amendment. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember DiPolito. All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously.
The final item is approval of the acceptance and payment of $11,000 for one easement for the extension of Sway Branch Drive. Alice Wakefield.
This is also another project involving the extension of Sway Branch Drive. The easements for the Sway Branch Drive project includes 3 parcels. The easements provide for temporary construction, permanent and driveway easement. One of the easements is a donation. One is no longer required, and the cost for this one easement is at a cost of $11,000. The recommendation of staff is approval.
Does the council have any questions? Do we have a motion?
Move to approve the acceptance and payment of $11,000 for easement on Sway Branch Drive.
Motion for approval by Councilmember Price. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember DiPolito. Any further discussion? Anyone in the audience have any questions or comments? All in favor of the motion, raise their hands. Passes unanimously. The city attorney is recommending closure for discussion of litigation, personnel, and acquisition of real estate. Is there a motion for closure? Motion by Councilmember Wynn. Is there a second? Second by Councilmember Eichelhardt. All in favor raise their hands. Passes unanimously. This meeting is adjourned. Council is to meet for closure downstairs.